People are fascinated by French luxury goods. They dream of them and sometimes even lose their heads. Clothes, jewels, accessories, luxury creations fetch the highest prices, from one end of the planet to the other. But how, where, and by whom are these much-desired objects brought into existence? Within workshops that are often kept secret, we have chosen to go and meet craftspeople who design 4 products that symbolize made in France luxury. The Hermès scarf, the Chanel 2.55 bag, Western boots, and jeweler Chaumet's Link rings. From applied arts to industry, the luxury trades combine manual work and the latest technology. This know-how is at the heart of the biggest challenge to the French luxury sector: how to satisfy growing demand while standing firm for the highest quality. Luxury sees itself as praising time. The first stage of our journey is designing these 4 objects. The geometrical Hermès scarf, a 90-centimeter square, has become a symbol of French luxury since it first appeared in 1937. All luxury items need to contain a creative dimension, and many artists have designed Hermès scarves. The arrival of a new silk scarf involves a long crafting process, which lasts nearly 2 years.
I have been working for Hermès since 1979. The adventure began completely by chance. I rang the doorbell and offered them my watercolors. One thing led to another, a first scarf, then a second, a third. Here I still am. The story of the Promenade de Platon. I'm showing off the beauty of sport when the mind is involved at the same time, and the discovery of nature too. From some very intellectual things, I made something very simple. That little sketch there is really the starting point for the layout of the scarf. We have a Hermès reflex with a few rules to follow. The language must never offend, nothing shocking. Everything we say must be thought through.
In order to appeal to international customers, Hermès avoids upsetting people's sensitivities, and so the artist had to agree to change their design.
For La Promenade de Platon, there were a few things that needed modifying. There were some naked figures, completely naked, so that made things a bit difficult. We had to cover them. Same thing for the dancer. I was showing her legs. You see, we have to keep things simple for other countries, so I put a veil on. You can make out her legs, but not too much. You have to be gentle. Silk is soft, and so your work has to be done gently. The people who buy the scarf are aware of that and like it. Once I finished, it gets sent for engraving. It's no longer mine.
Annie Fèvre's design is sent to the area around Lyon to be adapted for printing on material.
My name is Nadine, and I'm a photo engraving draftswoman.
Nadine first goes over the outline of each shape on pieces of tracing paper. Having been set down in ink like this, the motifs will be perfectly clear when printed.
On average, one scarf may take 700 to 800 hours work. Once I finish the outline, I add all my colours one after the other, beginning with the darkest and ending with the lightest. I lay one down, then I put on another piece of paper and do the next one, and so on until I've done all my 33 colours.
Just as with stenciling, these black areas are where the colour will show when it's printed.
The most difficult thing in my job is really sticking to the design. I mean following it as faithfully as possible.
Our journey continues with the emergence of the Chaumet Le Lien ring. In high jewelry, handmade and made to measure rain, and each ring in the new Lien collection is a unique piece.
My name is Pascal Boudarier, and I'm Chaumet's 12th workshop manager. I started out in jewelry as an apprentice, and I've been practicing this trade for 35 years. When the design comes in from the studio, it is new to us, and so we take some time to think about how we're going to make it. To begin with, we can appreciate the quality of the idea we've been given. We take as much time as we need to think about what we're going to do, in what order we'll do it, what it means for us in fact, what formulas we're going to use, what systems we're going to make, etc. Because it's important at this first creative stage to see if we can actually make it. Whether there are any particular difficulties we're going to have to get past. And since we like to have diamonds everywhere, we're going to have to bring in some elements so that the final assembly matches the design we've been given. So I take my time. Sometimes I sleep on it a bit. Don't think that just buying a stone and having some metal in the workshop will turn out a Lien ring. Inevitably, there has to be research done beforehand, which will take into account creative aspects, the archives, the history of Chaumet and everything that has been made before.
A new luxury item has to ally innovation and the in-house traditions of the company that designs it. At Chaumet in Paris, founded in 1780 by Marie-Étienne Nitto, Béatrice de Plainval is in charge of heritage. For us, the curator goes back to the jeweler's origins.
It was for the coronation of the Emperor and Josephine that Nitto revived the fashion for tiaras. And the great painting of the coronation by David, which is on display at the Louvre Museum, clearly shows the birth of Parisian jewelry. Here are our two greatest ambassadors and biggest customers. Empress Josephine, the first wife of Emperor Napoleon I, and Empress Marie-Louise, for whom the most extravagant jewelry was made from France's crown jewels.
Nitto was Napoleon I's appointed jeweler, and Chaumet has a collection that is unique in the history of jewelry. Exceptional tiaras, but also archives containing 500,000 sketches and gouaches.
More than 3,500 tiaras have been produced since the House of Chaumet was founded. This is a tiara made of diamonds and platinum. Next to that, a Lien necklace, which is absolutely the source of inspiration for our Lien collection. These collections contain all the codes of a creative house. These codes are creative springboards for each age and each fashion.
Before going ahead with making a new piece of jewelry, Pascal Boudariat generally immerses himself once again in this archive collection, stamped with the House of Chaumet's expertise.
I've prepared the legitimacy of this theme for you, which is developed as a high jewelry ring. Here we see the links.
What period was that?
That was in 1900, 1905.
There has to be a message in that very first Lien.
Lien means link, it means union, it means affection, it means love, it means tenderness.
I believe the Chaumet style to be timeless. In fact, because each year we change the style, each year we try to adapt to women's styles. There's 230 years history. There are archives. Making jewelry for Chaumet is complicated. It's not just about putting together some stones and a piece of metal. It fits in with a way of thinking, with a history, with a collection. The craft of a jeweler, as it is practiced in France, really tends towards high jewelry. In other words, our way of working is unique in the world. We have very precise techniques for being light, attractive, for showing the stone to their best advantage, for finding very intelligent mechanisms. All that work is what has earned, and continues to earn, the fame of the French high jewellery.
Even when it isn't a new creation, designing a luxury item requires time. That's how it is for the boots made by J.M. Weston, a shoemaker who is 100% French, as you might not guess from the name. Luxury items must be long-lasting, and at Weston's, this aim is met thanks to the know-how of craftspeople making shoes which last a lifetime, even if it means resoling them after several thousand kilometers. Weston works in the Limoges area, where they shape soles by hand using a process which hasn't changed since the 19th century. In the last tannery in Europe to use old-fashioned methods, time is left to do its work. One of the tanners explains.
My name is Jean-Claude Perriat, and we are in the Moulin Follet at the Bastin Tannery, which nowadays belongs to Weston. It is a very old tannery. It is wood-based tanning, 100% natural, as it used to be done back in 1806. There has been no change in the fabrication process. Follow me, I'll take you around. Here you have, as you might say, a shoe in all its separate parts. What we'll work on is the sole that will be in contact with the ground, the outsole as it were, and the inner part of the shoe, the insole, where the foot will rest. For the outsole we need very thick leather. We're going to use some from the Simmental vase. I must tell you that here, for Weston, we only work with the rump, the noble part of the hide. That is to say, it's the part where the fibers are the densest and tightest. So that's where we'll get the best quality for the sole.
Once soaked and plucked, the hides are immersed in a series of tanning basins, which renders them rot-proof. During this long process, little by little, the hide turns into leather.
The first stage in tanning is a series of basins. The hides have been plunged into tannins, which are extracts of chestnut and quebracho, a tree from Argentina. That stage will last about 40 days.
The hides are then softened in vast wooden vats, then dexterously cut in two with a billhook, before being buried in pits. There, they are laid between two thicknesses of oak bark for 8 to 12 months, for a very slow tanning process. Once dug up, the pieces of leather go back into other vats to be nourished with cod liver oil. Insects, and particularly flies, have always been the tanner's enemy. We have an old trick for getting rid of them.
In this room, we keep the spider's webs. They're for destroying flies. The flies fly towards the windows, they land in the webs and the spiders kill them. It's as simple as that. They're destroyed quite naturally.
Next, the leather is flattened under the 10-ton pressure of a vast power hammer. A remnant of the industrial archaeology, as noisy as it is efficient in finishing off the waterproofing process. After many long months of treatment, the hides are now leather which is destined to go into the manufacturing process and become Western soles.
I like this job a lot because it's true that hide being transformed into leather is a magnificent thing. And when you see the finished goods, it really is worthwhile and fulfilling.
A luxury item embodies the expertise, history and traditions of a brand, and it may also be a previous creation, which is made to evolve. The 2.55 bag, which Coco Chanel dreamt up in 1995, has become one of the rare handbags bearing the signature of a clothes designer which has become timeless.
The bag 2.55 is mythical because so many women have carried it, from Jackie Kennedy via Elizabeth Taylor to, well, they've all carried it. Here's a photo we just found of Brigitte Bardot. Last week, we found a photo of Catherine Deneuve from '62 with that bag. They're just young things. It's really touching. They've got a current one. Karl made it out of aged leather. Thanks to Karl Lagerfeld's creativity, he has been able to update it both in colors and materials. His talent has been knowing how to bring these items, which are typical of the Chanel style, up to date.
The huge workshop where the bags are crafted is found in Picardy. The fabrication process brings together handmade and high-tech elements. The craftspeople take on board the demand for quality right from the beginning. With white coats and in laboratory-style conditions, they put the leather intended for the 2.55 through a battery of tests.
This is the beginning of designing the 255. It all begins here in the hides, laid out flat. This is calf skin. My job is to check the leather. We use a gauge to check the thickness. We look for any small flaws or bigger ones. We have a target example, color, shine and how wrinkled. We look at the general quality, making sure it's excellent. Here's an example of a hide with parts of it removed, which means that hide will be downgraded.
The raw material checks carry on with Lydie, who puts the leather through damp resistance and tearing tests. Since they may be sold in the tropics or in Russia, these bags must of course be able to keep their appearance and hold up in all latitudes.
Here I'm going to perform the abrasion test, which checks how well the leather stands up to friction. I'm placing the sample onto the abrasive fabric.
The lab worker compares the results with a rating sheet in order to set aside any leather which doesn't come up to standard. Finally, Lydie uses a climate chamber to check that it is resistant in all circumstances.
We're going to test it at 45 degrees heat and 90% humidity.
At the end of this first stage, the 4 luxury items have begun their metamorphosis. The design has been chosen, the raw materials selected, and now we're going to be able to see them being made. Thanks to the craftspeople's expertise, the materials are going to become shapes. The machines obey their every command. The scarves must be flawless in quality, and Hermès have decided to take control of all of the stages of production. Here, somewhere in the Isère region, is where highly qualified employees weave the silk fabric that is printed on. In order to make these kilometers of entirely flawless material, 42 machines do their work under the scrupulous eye of workers, who watch the 23,000 threads crossing over at the breakneck speed of 25 kilometers an hour. The silk fabric produced then undergoes quality control, performed by the visitor. This is the poetic name given to a worker experienced in the art of detecting the slightest imperfection. The visitor makes any correction she can, or completely removes any imperfect material, which will be put to other uses. In parallel, somewhere in the suburbs of Lyon, the Hermès teams have to dream up the color harmonies which will grace the new scarf.
My name is Delphine and I'm 30 years old. I've been here for about a year, working on the dyeing of scarves. What I do is work with my colors in order to find a true and balanced harmony of colors. After, I'll work with the touches of color directly on the design and decide where to place them. For example, they're on the gilded leaves. I could decide now that I'd like them to look green. And there's the same thing. I'm going to find flesh colors to make the figure's face stand out.
Choosing a harmony of colors is not as straightforward as it might seem. The scarf will be sold all over the world, and so there have to be different versions which will attract customers with different cultures and sensibilities. The various tracings which make up the scarf's design have been transferred onto metal frames, and the silk material has come to the manufacturer. Printing takes place on 150-meter tables and begins with the finesse. This is the first layer, which puts in place the outlines of the motifs. For this, the craftspeople are helped by robots, which make the pinpoint precision less tiresome. On the various sites, the production lines run around the clock, with 3 teams working alongside in shifts.
Each time you do something, you have to keep an eye on all the motifs around your design.
Even this rapid pace has proven insufficient to meet demand, so Hermès regularly opens new workshops and is continually hiring and training new craftspeople.
My name is Patricia. I have been working for the company for 27 years. I started on printing and now I'm a trainer. At the moment, I'm training Mona. The important thing is for me to pass on all my know-how. When I leave, I know that everything I have learned will stay behind. Always a little trickle, and careful about getting it on the pot. Give it a turn. There you are.
I'm being taught all the principles of fabric printing, from the beginning of the design, from the finesse, up to the last frame.
And after 15 or 20 panels, you add some more, but not a lot. Always just a trickle.
The aim of this training is for all these movements to become automatic, so they become natural to me.
Always keep an eye on the title so that stays lined up.
Yeah, it overlaps a bit here.
Yes, but wait for the next panel.
It's a job that takes meticulous work, that takes attentive work. It's skillful, it's a job that demands excellence, in fact.
There you see, you're in the right place. The height is right. There, check your title. Never forget the top edge.
There, it's in its place. It's a difficult job, I have to say. Difficult because you're standing up for long periods. It's also difficult for work for the eyes because you stay concentrating for a long time on little details. It really is difficult, physically and for your eyes.
Layer by layer, colour after colour, the scarf designed by Annie Favre gradually emerges. In the Chaumet High Jewellery Workshop, making the Lien ring is a long process. Each unique piece is created from scratch, and shaping it calls on the skills of a jeweller, a setter, and a polisher.
For each new piece, we perform trials because we don't know it all, and we will inevitably have to communicate with the creative studio. At least for the first one, number one, we have to do drafts and models for them so they can get an idea of the volumes. For the first Lien ring, that preparation took us about 8 months. That gives us an idea of the amount that has to be done up front to achieve the result. Here's a little model of Lien ring I'll show you. The advantage is being able to try it on and being able to see how it looks with the stone that has been chosen. To actually make a Lien ring takes about 2 months on average because it has diamonds everywhere. It's a very, very slim ring, so we have to do things carefully. It's not 2 months full time, but there's a lot of different stages and operations needed to arrive at the final result.
Each artisan jeweller makes their own set of tools, each of which has a precise function and requires specific know-how.
In jewelry, you need a lot of tools. Those are all the ones for welding. That's a saw. In fact, it's also called the jeweler's violin. It's a little tool you can put saw blades in. Last thing, the bench peg, which is a little piece of wood you lean on to hold the pieces. Each of us has our own one. You make notches. You set it up as you like. And that peg is sort of the jeweler's identity card, in that each person has their own way of working. No two people do it the same way. The workshop manager is in charge of giving the work to be done to each jeweller, according to their ability, their skill, how long they've been in the job, their individual possibilities. Well,
So I'm going to.
how's it going?
Not bad, I'm going to start assembling.
Have you had the first level set? Is everything set?
No, not yet.
No?
I wanted to go through the stages with you once I got everything assembled. My name is Yann Richard. I am a jeweler. I joined Chaumet 5 years ago. I had a 2 years apprenticeship here too.
In the workshop, the tradition is for us always to have a trainee. So we always take on an apprentice every year and train them up because it's a difficult job and it takes time. Give that to Avidis. He'll give you back the 2 tiers and you can begin welding, okay? And then we'll have a look together.
I'll come back to you when I have 2 ties.
Come and see me on my office, yes?
Okay, we'll do, fine.
As apprentices, we all learn a way of working, which is what makes our craft so rich. So you can't get around it. That's what makes people really good. We still work with the same tools as 200 years ago, basically, so that's the way the training always happens. You have to be very careful about the gap between the 2 links, so it's always the same on both sides, so it's always balanced. We have a very technical job. What's more, we work with precious stones, so we have something really valuable in our hands. So you can't just start off with a 15-carat diamond straight out of school. So you begin with just small stones and so on. And you get your hand in, as they say. Yeah, it's a nice shape. That's going to be pretty.
To make a lien ring, which is basically made up of round wire, first we form the gold into round wires with several diameters. Once this ring was turned, we set for the stones all around it to hold the diamonds. A jeweler's job is to take the design and make it the piece, give it volume, make all the architecture bearings in mind, the stone and the various materials which will make up the jewel. Once all the elements have been welded, we can put the sapphire in its place, set it and have the ring polished.
The work of the jeweler is justified by the richness of the stones that are put at our disposal. For the Lien ring specifically, it's an exceptional stone which is about 10.43 carats from Madagascar, a very beautiful Cushion sapphire. When you hold the stone in your hand, you do feel honoured and spoiled, yes. But there's only one. Nature doesn't do series and so on. So that makes an object a unique piece. That too justifies the work we do.
In the suburbs of Limoges, other sorts of know-how participate in the making of Western boots, which are a classic of made-in-France luxury that first appeared in the 1970s. The making of these shoes requires 180 different operations, and only 30 or so pairs are produced each day.
Hello, my name is Sylvain Honoré, and I've been a production manager for Weston for 13 years now. Here you are at J.M. Weston's Limoges factory, which is where all the shoes sold throughout the world are made. The boot is made up of 20-odd parts, bearing in mind that the upper part of the shoe is cut in a single piece.
At the factory, business begins in the storeroom, where the leathers intended for the uppers, the top parts of the shoes, are stored.
Apart from the calf, we use many exotic hides such as shark, ostrich, lizard, and also crocodile, which you can see here. The cutter is going to come here to get his hide to cut out the Western shoe shape.
The brand only uses flawless hides. Whether he cuts by hand or with the assistance of a computer, the craft cutter first takes an expert look at the leather in order to avoid any damaged parts.
My name is Jean-Pierre, and I've been working in shoes since 1974 and at Weston since '85. I am a hand cutter, so we use traditional techniques. Here are my tools: a knife, a stone, and a 3-square file. Now I'm going to cut out a boot, and afterwards I take a smaller shape, so as to get as many pieces as possible from the hide. To really master the subject, it takes more than a year. During the cutting stage, one of the key operations in making a J.M. Weston boot is conforming. This operation consists of shaping this big piece of leather on a wooden block, which makes the shoe longer lasting. Next, we put together the various parts which make up the top of the shoe. To do that, we use cotton thread, which goes perfectly with the noble material we use here and that we work with, leather. This operation is very precise and detailed, so it takes a long time to acquire the necessary know-how. This is the part which gives the upper part of the shoe its particular character. Training good seamstresses to perform that step takes a lot of time.
J.M. Weston have always refused to relocate their production, in spite of the difficulty of recruiting specialist craftspeople in France. The company has long since gone into collaboration with those few journeymen whose speciality is shoes.
My name is Adele and I'm 23. I've been working for Western for about a year, and this year I've done some stitching. The difficult thing about stitching is really the precision. You really have to be spot on, to be the right distance from the edge with regular stitches, so they aren't different widths when you go around the corners and things like that. At the start, you have to take it slowly to get used to the material you've got in your hands, and once that's okay, you can go faster. It really becomes instinctive. You have to stop thinking, completely forget where you are, and just see the lines in your hands do the job for you, in fact. What's good about know-how for me is that once you've mastered it, you can get away from the technique a bit. As soon as you really master your job precisely, you can let yourself go on the creative side and really have fun and do things which you like. My career? Well, I did a literary baccalaureate, and then I went to university to study modern literature. I did my 3 years. I got my degree, and during those 3 years, I really became aware that it wasn't the right path for me. I'm much more manually orientated. I did a lot of art, that sort of thing. I realized that it was what I really wanted to do, to work with my hands, designing very small, minute things, very fine and delicate, so I decided to go into craft work. Really, the important thing for me was to be making useful things. That's it, making useful things. And shoes definitely have their place. They're jolly useful, but you can also make that object a useful and attractive thing, and that's what I like.
Here, we do the mounting. This stage of making the shoe is when we put together the top part of the shoe, which we call the upper, with the inner sole, so we call that the insole. For this operation, we're going to shape the upper by pulling it over the last, and pulling hard to give it its volume. That's really the moment when the shoe takes on its dimensions, and is no longer something flat, but something with real volume.
A pair of Westons is expensive but long-lasting, thanks to the Goodyear stitch. It's a technique imported from the States by the founder of the brand at the end of the 19th century, which involves stitching a band of leather around the shoe.
The principle of the Goodyear stitch is to make it possible to resole the shoe regularly according to usage and the age of the shoe, which adds several years to its life. That way, you keep the same shoe and have it repaired using traditional methods.
Resoling is done right in here. Old models from all over the world are put into the hands of our craftsmen to be restored. Today, another apprentice, Jordan, is officiating.
My name is Jordan Vouvray. I'm 20. Right now I'm working on reparations. It involves taking apart the worn-out pairs and then completely resoling them. What I like about reparations is that you stay in touch with the tools rather than machines. I chose this path because my family has been in leather for generations. My grandfather is a journeyman saddler. My father is a leather craftsman by trade. So I chose to become a shoemaker in order to be able to take over their company. So I've got into made-to-measure shoes and boot making. There you go.
By creating the 2.55, Gabrielle Chanel revolutionized the story of handbags and contributed, in a rather unusual way, to women's liberation.
She had the idea of putting a shoulder strap onto this handbag because she liked to smoke. She liked putting her hands in her pockets, and so she wanted to have her hands free. That was very, very new at the time. And also the thing about it was how functional it was. That's to say, the inside is trimmed with big red beads so you can see what's inside, because black on black, you can't see a thing. And also she put in lots of little secret pockets. Here the women in the workshop say, this is the Mona Lisa smile to put your cloakroom ticket in. This is, you say, your metro ticket. Mademoiselle Chanel moved into this apartment shortly after 1935. Here there are lots of things that symbolize Mademoiselle, including these little quilted cushions. And we think that's the quilting which led to the birth of this quilted bag, which first saw the light of day in February '55. I've brought you two little pieces of the pattern for making these bags. You can clearly see the quilting drawn on this pattern, which dates back to 1955. You cut it out practically like a dress, and you make it like a dress.
Making the 2.55 associates handmade techniques and high technology. The padded stitching is carried out automatically by a robot, which solves a geometrical problem. Once the sack is put together, all the diamond shapes need to coincide, and a specially designed computer program prepares this very precise layout.
Now that I've finished the black quilting, my logo is burgundy, so I've changed my thread. I'm going to start the program. So there, the stitches need to be superimposed. There, my logo stitching is finished. So now I'm checking that the stitches are indeed superimposed. Okay, the pieces are just right so they can go off to be assembled.
The 2.55 is really made in our workshops like a haute couture dress. You can choose whatever you want. It ranges from jersey to lamb, but we can make it in crocodile, alligator, lame, silk. It really is a couture creation. It's made of 50 pieces and it takes 180 different operations to put it together. Between 10 and 18 people work on one bag.
The 2.55 is a fashion accessory made up of two bags, which, once one is fitted into the other, become one. It is made by assembling the different pieces stitching side out, the same as for a piece of clothing.
All the pieces are laid out flat on the table. Then we lay them on top of each other and finish up with a bag that has volume. The most difficult part is the stitching, because there are a lot of rules to follow. Chanel quality rules. You need to have good mastery of the machine.
Grace, can you come and see? I finished the pocket.
Right, Elodie. You're going to match up your diamonds. It must all follow on. It's going to make a single piece.
Okay.
I'm training Elodie. I accompany her in everything she does. I follow her. I help her to move forwards.
I'm 22 years old and I've been with Chanel since September in the Center for Expertise to finish off my training in leatherwork. On this bag, I'm stitching the back pocket onto the outside. So, in fact, you have to respect couture values and make sure it's homogeneous. What's complicated about leatherwork is concentrating all day on small pieces. I chose this field because, in fact, I'm very meticulous. I like quality, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist too.
Here we are at the end of our tour. In the luxury goods crafts, particular attention is paid to finishings. These exceptional products are sold for high prices all around the world, and so must keep their promises. When the printing process is finished, the 150-meter roll of silk is laid out to dry. At Hermès, the last stage in making the scarves and its success is in the expert hands of a single craftsperson.
My name is Laure. I did a vocational certificate in dressmaking with delicate fabrics, made to measure, and a vocational baccalaureate in applied arts and crafts. I'm doing the finishing on this scarf, so I'm rolling up the edges. Rolling means I make a roll with my fingers, and I do 1 millimeter stitches every 0.7 millimeters. It takes 45 minutes to make a scarf. So you can take 45 minutes or a little more. But you're not really watching the time. The most important thing is the quality of the finishing. You have to like precision, in fact. So now I'm finishing my roll, and I'm fetching up back where I started, and I'm going to finish it without making any knots, because there aren't any knots in the scarf. The most difficult thing for me is to keep up the same regular rhythm all day. Once I finished my scarf, added the label, checked, and folded it. It goes off to be ironed, and looked over one more time, and I begin on the next one.
At Chaumet, the setter takes center stage. His role is to fit the precious stones into each piece of the lien ring that the jeweler has put together.
I'm working on one of the elements of a lien ring now. Now, I'm picking up the piece in order to widen the hole so that I can fit the stone into it until the stone fits in really well. Now, I'm going to push the diamond so that it sits flush. Once it's sitting right, I clean it and get rid of any roughness around it. Of course, these stones are 0.8 of a millimeter wide, nearly the size of a pinhead.
The setter regularly gets his work checked.
Yes, it's fine. Yeah, that's it.
There. Now the stone won't budge. Once I've finished setting the piece, I remove it from the cement and give it to the jeweler, and he'll put the ring together.
Each year, we do something different. And in fact, that's what I like about my job. It's not like working in a factory. I'm not mass-producing things that I do well, but which don't really interest me anymore after a while. It's more a case of preparing unique pieces which may be used to make a series. But at the beginning, there is a workshop which makes the pieces. To end up with the final result, it's a team effort.
The end of this slow progression is polishing, which is the final stage in making these jewels. At J.M. Weston's Limoges workshop, the finishing touches are known as pampering.
Here, we get busy giving the leather back its initial beauty because it's been worked with, dampened, and even pulled it about a bit when we were putting the boots together. So now we move on to waxing, paying particular attention to the sole, and we pamper all that so that in the end the product is perfect.
For the 2.55, the first step of finishings is riveting the eyelets and then adding the chain.
Well, now the bag goes onto the rack to go off and be checked.
I'm doing the final check. The bag is finished and I check all the parts where we have to be especially careful. That means that if I find any flaws, I remove it from the series. There, so I always begin checking the inside of the bag to see if the stitching is nice and regular. I check the CC is well sewn on. After that, I go over the bag from right to left. I check the outside of the bag. There. Next, I check the clasp to make sure it's not scratched or anything. I put it back in place carefully so as not to break the second flap. Now I put my felt inside. From time to time, I come across a sack with a flaw, so I take it out of the series and put it to one side. And that's a bag that won't be sold. So if there's a thread sticking out or something, we turn it away and put it to one side. Okay, so I'm taking my bag. I'm going to check the length of the chain. So I measure. Once the bag has been checked over, it goes on another rack ready to go.
As with all luxury goods, these bags, which are the stuff of dreams, will soon fetch huge prices on the world's most beautiful avenues. Luxury groups' images and their futures depend on keeping alive this very specific know-how. These little-known trades where meticulousness and patience are key.
A successful piece takes hours and hours of work. Once it's finished, it's a bit like a work of art. You're never sure you'll be able to do it as well again. So people do really need to understand. This isn't industrial, it's handmade. Behind it are craftspeople, people with sensitivity, with know-how like we've been saying, who have sleepless nights from time to time, but in all cases they give the best of themselves.
True made-in-France luxury goods are there thanks to that know-how. It's a cultural and technical heritage that the craftsmen perpetuate daily.
It's not just a silk object, it's a whole story. A story about making beauty, about beautiful things. That's it. Quite simply too, but as a team, each giving the best of themselves.
The handmade objects these craftspeople produce conceal a little bit more soul that no mass-produced industrial product can boast of.
I've made a pair of moccasins. Look, it's a work in progress, so there's lots of things that aren't quite right. The last is a size 37, so I'm hoping they'll fit me and I'll be able to wear them. There you go.